Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another video. Today we're actually going to be discussing a crazy update released by CS2. Not officially confirmed, let me add that, but according to Price Empire, they have removed all rare cases from the drop pool. Looking at these, looking at the drop percentage, they're no longer active. These have been, I guess, increased in weight or averaged out to make up the rest of the drop pool drop. So yeah, um, that's that's led to a crazy increase in some of the prices for most of the rare cases. Looking at the Spectrum case, it spiked a little and actually retraced a bit, but it's actually like 50p up since the speculation or unofficial announcement of removal. The clutch has seen a stable increase, gone up by nearly 20%. And I love talking percentages over monetary because percentages basically end up there, even with anything. So 20% is not a bad increase um, for a pretty relatively cheap entry budget case. Gamma 2 case saw a spike initially when people when people found out, and then bam. I think people maybe have held previously, and then just was like, yeah, I'm going to get rid of mine. And they drove the price back down to around 20% or 10%. So still decent, nearly beating Steam tax if you bought around here. So keep going. I reckon if it stabilizes back at like £5, not a bad investment to be going into. Cases like Breakout, which we're seeing kind of volatile price range daily. Quite a large variation, 90p in days. 140, 130. Actually saw quite a big spike. I guess this is a more later release case and comparable to some of the others. The Spectrum and stuff like that, I guess, um, aren't that old. Operations being quite old. Not much in circulation relation. Even with most of the cases, to be honest, all the rares, apart from the snakebite, this is quite recently removed. So there's still quite a good supply. So this is quite a largely, commonly open case because it's fairly cheap and the drops are pretty good. But this saw a 20% increase, which is quite drastic. We can see it with the, I'll leave that till last actually. But yeah, there was no official. It was just about capsules. Maybe it was like a sneak update. It really hurts um, with cases then. So for me, like looking at this with the spike, I think it's a good interesting market. So I do think the case removal will be accelerated slowly, and we'll get more things, maybe like the terminal. Um, Cases and skins from cases will become the new grey rares, where it's like, yo, you're an OG, or like they'll be a bit more like valued. So I could see an increase in some skin prices from the cases in the grand scheme of things, just to average out the case value as well. Um, but that's like general spike in today's news, which is a nice bit. Um, in relation to the rest of the market, I think the rest of the market's still been going up in most of the skins with like averaging out or chasing. But yeah, that actually leads me on to um, the case I was actually going to talk about, the Dreams and Nightmares. This is actually chronologically the next one that's probably going to get removed. Well, was released before the Revolution, and I think it's a recoil. Um, I do think, even though the drop rate is increased at the moment, this will slowly get removed and they might replace it with something else. Really good skins from this, and you get a chance of getting a butterfly and stuff like that. So just speculate, like it has bottomed out in quite a while. It was averaging at like 166, 150, now at like 124, which is actually not a bad price. Some have sold for 106. It's a good case. This is not financial advice, but it's very popular cases in relation to a lot of them. Yeah, we can see like we wanted to consider some of the confirmed rares, like which ones are being mostly opened. This will show us confirm us a fracture case, very fairly cheap. Prisma CS20, Snakebite has increased pretty significantly in price. Let's look at the fracture case. I'm assuming that's probably gone up pretty. Yep, that's all like a 20% increase. So I do think supply is now limited and it's going to be depleted. So we can always go to CS donks and look at the average. Now some of them have been removed. We can like conclude them with the lowest time to extinction to it. So we can actually acknowledge that these are now kind of statutory variables, and we can now kind of take this time frame to not take into account like the growth of supply. But yeah, fracture case doesn't really have one at the moment. Estimated remain, it dropped. Let's just dropped, so like 160k back in, still in circulation around. Not a bad case. Looking at some of the most common, like lowest time to extensions, we can look at these. Falcon, I think Falcon is actually maybe a little bit underrated. This is going out before these. So I don't know if they're like in relation to wanting to open a case, you'd want to open a Falcon. But yeah, Snakebite's actually 102 months. So it's actually around 10 years for it to be completely depleted. I think this might show me different, slightly. But like if we're looking at the unboxing numbers out of the total unboxing, it's like 1.2%, 2% nearly every quarter, is it? Every month? Like, yeah, 2% declining. But if we're not on average for every month, not bad. May even take 50 months to deplete the entire haul. I feel like there'll be a point where people start valuing them and not being like wanting to sell them. So yeah, also like I guess this is like an implication of EU's like legislation of removing loot boxes. Valve are trying to adhere so they can still appeal like participate in the EU market and don't lose like a majority proportion. They're like, yeah, we'll take a cut in the losses. So they'll change. I think they'll change like some of, well, I guess the armory is one example. But yeah, skins wise, there are quite a few. I do think these will generally average out. There hasn't been significant price increases at the moment. I think like looking over like the breadth of all of them, there might be a few. But I'm considering buying up some of these. Just because as depletion of like getting inks and stuff from cases, that means they're less likely to get reds, less likely to get or trade up to reds, less trade up to golds, and then we have a finite kind of number of potential golds that can come into existence, coverts and pinks. So yeah, these are potentially good lookouts to look into. Not bad, but that is pretty much all of it. Let me know if you guys managed to pick up any cases before the spike or you're considering any. Drop a like and subscribe, please. And much love. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye bye.